Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Shuchi, and I'm the director of the Transnational Literature Series at Brookline Booksmith out of Boston, Massachusetts. The Transnational Literature Series brings international writers to a U.S. audience and emphasizes works in translation. Usually our events are in-store, but we are going to be virtual for the rest of the year. We have just one more event this summer before we take a break until September. If you want to know more about what we have coming up, you can sign up for our newsletter or follow us on Instagram or Twitter. Just a few Zoom tips. The bottom of the screen, you'll see a few icons. One of those is a Q&A icon where you can enter in your questions for tonight's guests. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can toward the end of the hour. Another button will get you to the chat window. My colleague Pierce will be dropping useful information in there, including links to tonight's book. We do make every effort to keep these events free to attend in the hopes that you will purchase the featured book from us. So thank you in advance for taking a look and supporting independent bookstores. And finally, you can see us, but we can't see you. So relax and please enjoy the talk. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Andrzej Tichý and Nichola Smalley. Andrzej Tichý was born in Prague to a Polish mother and a Czech father. He has lived in Sweden since 1981. The author of 5 novels, 2 short story collections, and a wide range of nonfiction and criticism, Tichý is widely recognized as one of the most important novelists of his generation. His novel, Wretchedness, which he'll be discussing today, was shortlisted for the 2016 August Prize and won the 2018 Avon Johnson Prize. Andrzej will be in conversation with the translator of Wretchedness, Nichola Smalley. Nichola is a translator of Sweden and Norwegian literature and works as a published for And Other Stories. Thank you both for being here tonight, and thank you all. Now, Andrzej and Nichola.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks. Thank you, Shuchi. So I think that we should start off with a reading to kind of set the scene of this novel. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of break up the chat with a few short readings, and I wonder, Andrzej, if you could first of all, before starting with this first reading, if you could tell us a little bit about what the book is about, just very briefly.
Well, very briefly, it's about a man, a musician, cellist, who is on his way to a concert in Copenhagen. He's in Malmö, Sweden, and he's waiting for his colleagues. And while he's waiting, he meets a junkie, a young man who asks him for some change. And that sort of sets off, that meeting makes him remember things and go through, like his mind starts to wander and sort of break. And yeah, I mean, that's the setting. And then the things, the memories are like, things that have happened to him, like his upbringing and his earlier life before he was a musician.
Sorry, I really put you on the spot there. That wasn't quite the intention. Anyway, so can you read a little bit from the beginning of the book?
Yeah, I will. So these are the 2 first pages. That last day, a Friday afternoon at the beginning of October, I was waiting for the guitarist and the composer down by the canal, by the gravel track between the police station and the water. I stood there thinking about the wax plants, whose whitish pink and perfumed petals had opened overnight, and about some of the lessons I felt I might take away from that morning's practice of a Chelsea piece. which had been as focused as it was fruitful. And just as I was unsuccessfully trying to remember the name of an Italian philosopher who'd written a long and exceptionally deep and incisive essay on Chelsea's work and importance, a guy came up and asked if I could spare any change for the homeless. I felt about in my right pocket and found a 20-krona note, scrunched up, irregularly folded, which I gave to him. He took it without a word and stuffed it in the pocket of his black jacket, whose fur-edged hood was pulled up, hiding large parts of his head. I was smoking, and I could see that he was looking at the cigarette, following it with his eyes. I saw him, but I didn't offer him one. I looked back at him, looked him straight in the eye, and I wasn't afraid. He was a young guy, really thin, frail, I thought. If he tries anything, I'll knock him down, no problem, even if he has a knife or a gun. He was still looking at the cigarette as I brought it to my lips. I took a drag and then let my hand drift from the lower part of my face down to my stomach, approximately level with my navel. And I saw his eyes follow the movement. I exhaled, smoke and ember, paper and tobacco. I should have offered him a cigarette, but I didn't think of it. He could have asked, but he didn't. And I saw he was looking at my bike, which was leant against the wooden bench behind me, or perhaps it was a utility box. Then he said he'd been beaten up the previous night. He said, I don't know where I'm going to sleep, and I got beaten up yesterday. He said someone had hit him in the ribs and in the face. I looked again, and now I saw it, a bruise and a little graze on his left cheek by his cheekbone. I asked him, who beat you up? He said something I didn't understand. He said a name. His tongue moved in his mouth. I asked why, and he said something about them getting junked too much. He said, he's a whore. Those words made me flinch a little, as though their aggression was too intimate, and all at once I thought of Robert, a childhood friend I'd recently bumped into on a sunny day down by the sea, down by Limhamn Fields, before a five-a-side match. We hadn't seen each other for years. He was big and well-built now, no longer the gangly teenager I remembered. And he told me in a neutral tone, with no shame or swagger, that he'd been inside, that he'd stabbed a guy with a screwdriver when he was interrupted doing a robbery. He did a few years, got out, and got a job at some factory making optical equipment or whatever. He said it was cool now. It was good to have a job. I told him briefly what I'd been doing the last few years. I mentioned the adult education classes, the Academy of Music, and my life as a freelance musician. It's cool, I said, adding that I guess it must be nice to have a permanent job. He replied that it wasn't permanent. He was on a 0-hours contract. But there's stuff to do, he said.
Thank you, Andrzej. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about where the inspiration for writing this novel came from. So you mentioned that it's about a musician who kind of has these sort of memories and goes back into his past. Yeah. Where did that come from?
Well, I guess initially the novel came out of, I was like trying to do something else. I was trying to write something very different. And at the time there was a lot of things going on around me, and people that I knew and people that sort of people around me that were going through things that were sort of difficult and in a lot of ways connected to where we all came from and where we grew up, and I was sort of trying to deal with it without really intending or wanting to write a book about it, about these things. Because I wrote a book, my first novel that I published 15 years ago was about kids in like these housing estates that were sort of under a lot of pressure and how they dealt with those things, and I sort of felt like I was done with it, but then it sort of all came back in a way. And the start of the novel was actually the scene that's the beginning now. The sort of I guess I was trying to figure out how can you write about it and without being there, or I mean being there and not being there at the same time. I guess that's what the book is about in a lot of ways, how you sort of carry those things with you all your life, these problems that are related to class and to migration and yeah, those things.
I remember, when I was translating the book, I visited Andrzej in Malmo, and I remember him talking about this feeling of this realization that you'd had at some point of like, it could have been me, like, and that's something that kind of comes into the book like that.
Yeah, I mean that's a sort of I mean that's a very common trope, I guess. I mean it's a sort of figure that maybe not so much in literature, but if maybe we'll talk more about like influences and specifically rap music and hip hop later, but in hip hop that's a very common trope, sort of it could have been me, and what's the difference between me and the person that is, you know, and everyone has their own answers, and I think this was sort of a way of trying to answer that.
Yeah.
Because, and also like
No, sorry, what were you going to say?
I mean there's also this sort of, I mean there's a word in Sweden in Swedish to describe sort of social mobility. It's called klassresa. It means like class journey, or sort of to describe what you do when you leave one class and move up to another. And it's
only
sort
in
of,
that direction, right?
yeah, I mean, you could say that you an omvänd klassresa, like a reverse class journey, but then it's, so I guess the meaning of it, the word is yeah, you go upwards. But that metaphor to me is not really, it doesn't really work, because, or it's misleading, because it's sort of like you can't really leave, you never leave it, and that's one of the problems, like in a society, it's always there, and if it's not in you or the people around you, then it's still just you know, around the corner, and you can't really leave the society that's so marked, or so you know, where these divisions
Like
are so
like
violent.
the stratification.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, you say that like lots of people do this and it's a really common trope, but I feel like it's rarely done in a way that like I feel like when I first read this book, so I read this book in Swedish, and after like our editor went to Sweden and was talking to different editors, and the editor who had published this book in Sweden said to our editor, like, you know, this is the book that I think you should publish. Like, if you were to publish, if you were to take one of my books and translate it into English, this would be the one. And so I got, you know, basically he brought it back, and I read the book, and I really felt like I've read lots of books that are about, you know, kind of class, and I've read lots of books about race and about immigration, but I'd never read one that did this, but also had like the level of sort of like complexity and artistry, and also like a real kind of attempt to like use the form of the book to express that feeling of like of sort of being trapped in your history, and being trapped in all of the memories, and kind of tied up in the like almost, you know, like survivor guilt or whatever. And I guess that's why I was so excited about it. And one thing that I really love about the book, and one thing that so like, you know, this is not like an easy book. You're not going to like take it to the beach. Well, actually, I mean, you could take it to the beach and read it, but it would be like a bit of a trip. You know, it's a really complex book, and one of the things that makes it really complex is the many different voices, or like the many different voices, and the kind of lack of signaling of like which different voices speaking at which time.
Yeah.
But it's also like, that is just wonderful. Like for me, like when I first read it, I really felt like I was sort of pulled along, you know, by the force of the narrative, like absolutely drawn along in all of these different voices, you know. And I've read this book like I don't know how many times now, and now I understand how everything fits together. But the first, like when I first read it, I didn't understand how anything fits together at all. I'm sure like people who are, you know, who've bought it and are reading it, like get to the end and they're like, wow, what? But the power of the narrative, and you know, that drive, and the strength of the voices, and the rhythm with which the voices are kind of are speaking to you in the book, is like, it just, yeah, that really pulled me through. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about voices, and I wondered if you could read this second little excerpt that we've got, that I think like kind of pulls out, like, I don't know, captures a few of those different voices.
Yeah. Somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle. I can't remember what page it was. I wrote it down, but it's in an email behind this.
And when Soot showed Hans on those drawings, those sketches, he said, cool, you've got talent. But you know, you should do something simpler so the man on the street can appreciate it. You get me? Something straighter, clearer. And Soot took the pad back, pretended to gob on the floor, and said, stop chatting shit, bro. I am the fucking man on the street, you goddamn donkey. And Hanson opened his eyes wide and said, okay, man, chill. So draw something the donkey on the street will understand then. And Soot shook his head, and now everyone was shooting sideways glances at Adi. And someone shouted, Adi, Allah, we need to get off.
That wasn't actually the bit I meant.
That wasn't it?
That wasn't the bit. But we can also talk about that.
Okay.
I mean, that's also like.
Did I miss one? Were there 3 or 4?
There were 3, I think.
Was that the last one you meant?
It was. Maybe it was the last one. Sorry. Anyway, this is like a slick operation, as you can tell. We have perfected.
Oh no, sorry, it's my bad. I think you meant the one page 34.
Yeah, no, but we can talk about this. Like, okay. To be honest, we can talk about this now, because I mean, it's also it's like another example of the same thing. Well, it's a slightly different thing, but like another thing that I really love about the book, and another thing that for me personally was really exciting, was like the use of slang, and the way that slang is like, you know, the way that you use slang to kind of create like community and so on. What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, I think what you said earlier, I think that part of the sort of power of what I was trying to do, what I think works in the book is that, I mean, for one thing, I didn't really want to write it, and because I thought that, you know, writing about basically young male criminals, junkies, and, you know, people getting into trouble, just is a bit boring, or can be. And for a long time, I wasn't really interested in well, working with it. But because I was somewhere else, I mean, I was at that point really, I was interested into I was I was reading Simone Weil, and was into negative theology, and sort of the way that it uses paradoxes, and what this book works with a lot is like this double exposure, is that the word, and where things are, I mean, that could have been me, but it is me, and how can it still be me? And you know, why is that other guy not me? And in the book, it all comes together, and sort of it is very different and very how do you say, things that don't really fit, but they're sort of pressed together, or they're one whole. And language is one of those aspects of that. I mean, you have as a I mean, if you come from, I mean, I think everyone has this. You have like one way of speaking to your mother, to your friends from that you grew up with, and other ways of speaking to people you don't know when you're online or whatever. But when you're sort of, when these languages also are like, I want to say, like important, like social acts, or you have to change. I mean, if you come from certain areas, you speak in a certain way, you can't have a normal job or have a university degree by using that language. So it sort of becomes, I don't know, there's some kind of tension. And I think I was trying to sort of put them all together and make them equally important, or equally significant, like carrying the
yeah. I think that actually is really, that really comes across in the book, that like all of these different kinds of language and all of these different kinds of sociability have their value for the people that are using them. And like, you know, if you're going to treat the people that are using them, if you're going to give them all equal value, then you have to give their way of talking equal value as well, right? Another thing, like just like one thing that's really specific, and that is like in that section a little bit, is the kind of different languages. So you've got, basically, there's only a tiny example of it in this section, but like in areas of Sweden where well, areas of like every different country, to be honest, where you've had like mass migration over a long period, and you've got like people coming together who speak different languages, and maybe like they're like, when they first move to a country, like they find like like people who speak the same language as them, but then their kids will all like hang out together and share languages, and the different words from all of their different languages kind of come to form like you know, to form like the language of the area. And that, yeah, that I thought that was really beautiful. So yeah, just wanted to capture a little bit of that. But the bit that I really wanted to hear you read from was I think page 34.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Here, yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to like conduct you.
Well, apparently I need conducting, so. Okay, this is page 34. The guitarist and the composer were talking fast, so fast I couldn't keep up. I'd barely had time to understand the words, their import, before the next salvo came. A lot of people have experimented with microtonal tunings, the composer said. Students of Pauline Oliveros, who was doing that kind of thing too. She turned to me. She's listened to Chelsea a fair bit, I reckon. Bro, I can't do it. I can't take it anymore. Riverbed. Structures like mudbanks, levees, oxbow lakes, and cut-off channels out in the delta. And I thought again, I got off lightly. And Soot, I heard him say cherry orchard, just like that. Got off lightly. That place, if it is a place, it is a place, and it's a movement. It's a bus on a roundabout. It's a bus moving forward and round. It sways and I brace my body, grip the handhold. The bus judders, vibrates. The driver accelerates. Our bodies want to fall, outwards, backwards. And I grip the handhold and look up at the roof. And Alvin Lucier, that piece for cello and vases, have you played it? I mean, it's a completely different thing, right? But it sounds the same, if I'm not mistaken. I thought about Soot and another writer who'd recently died, hit by a commuter train. Not that I knew him or anything. I just read about it and saw it before me, as I'd seen Soot die again and again in my imagination. Even though it had never happened to him. Even though I knew he looked after himself, that he was careful. I'm careful, he always said. I'm careful. But you can never be careful enough. At 4 a.m, that other guy died, and he left the final tag behind him, a final little dash of color.
Thank you. That was really great.
Thank you.
So I guess like the reason I wanted you to read that specific bit was because there are so many, like more than just like voices of individuals, there are like different kind of narrative voices and narrative threads in there. I think actually it's a really good example of like the sort of like giving all of the, like giving equal value to different like individual voices, as we were talking about before, but also like you've got this kind of current like musician talking to his friends, and then suddenly like you've got like snaps and you've got him kind of going into his like reverie, and then like you've also got this kind of other, like it snaps again and you've got this other thing, that I
The
still
images.
don't know exactly what it is. Yeah, these images, exactly.
Yeah.
And then it kind of snaps back and it snaps back again. Like yeah.
Well, those are a lot of those parts. That's more like some kind of what do you call it? Static now, like the disturbance, like somehow how these images, you know, I don't know if this is a common thing, but you know, when you're just things that pop up in your head, and language that just shows up. sets you off course in a way, and prevents you from focusing on what you're in at the moment. And a lot of those images or descriptions are taken from different kinds of descriptions of like historical descriptions of slums or poor, I mean, environments where poor people live. So there, it's like, yeah, on some level, a part of the cellist's sort of, I don't know, the imagery that he carries somehow that also ties him to people in the past, I think. I mean, I'm aware, I think it disturbs more than it, I mean, it's not clear and it's not supposed to. I think it's sort of, maybe some of the, because originally when I started writing this, it wasn't like all without paragraphs. So it was a bit different. I mean, when you juxtapose these images, you have at least some kind of breathing pause. But I think now you sort of just run into them and suddenly you're somewhere else.
I mean, I really think that that's incredibly powerful. Like, to me, that was really powerful as a reading experience. That thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard it before, and I think that some of the things that really, I mean, I think that this book to work the way, or to be able to work, and I can't really say why. Maybe because in the end there's a sort of
there's a twist.
Plot twist, yeah. So you can read it at the beach.
The thriller.
It is. But to be able, I mean, it has to be able to. There has to be this pace so that you're sort of thrown between characters without really knowing it beforehand. Like you have to be there, and then where is this? And then somehow that becomes the this paradox or this impossible symbol.
Do you want to talk a little bit about influence? We touched on it very briefly, but it's something that we discussed quite a lot, or we have discussed quite a lot. I remember you told me about this Jonathan Lethem. Oh yeah, yeah. It was when we were trying to sort out the credits for all the hundreds of references to different songs. Actually, that's an exaggeration, but there are lots of references to different songs and quotes from lyrics and things like that. And when in Sweden you can get away with kind of just shoving these things in without really checking that whether people mind or not, mostly because it's written in Swedish, so Killer Mike is not Killer Mike is not going to be ringing you up going, excuse me. But then we had to do a little bit more than that when we were publishing it and other stories. But you sent me a link to a really great essay by Jonathan Lethem about the creative process.
Yeah. I mean, in this book, I've worked a lot more extensively, or more with sampling or stealing or rewriting my third novel, the book that came before this one. It's basically more than half of it is stolen or rewritten or sort of sampled in a way. I mean, that book would probably be impossible to publish in English, I guess. But I mean, there are Kathy Acker used to do things like that, and Burroughs and a lot of this cut up technology or technique does these things. And for me, in this book, it's not. I don't really use it that way. There's more traditional, maybe referencing or quoting, or like having some characters quote and so on.
But music does play a really big role in the book.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah. I guess it's also like, for instance, in hip hop, it's also like one of the cornerstones, or in rap, like quoting and referencing and reusing. And a lot of the influences when writing this book, I was listening a lot to Swedish contemporary at that time. I mean, this is 5 years ago, so the whole scene has changed a few times. But it was because I realized that a lot of the things that I wanted to write about, there's like a, what do you call it, a white spot on the map of Swedish literature. I mean, it's not totally blank, but it's not really, there are a lot of things that are not being written about, or that don't really exist, or at least are not, are very vague, so to say. Because mainly, I think, because in certain like parts of society, people are not interested in reading or writing like literature. Or maybe that those that are doing it are not really welcomed, or not really, there's not a clear way, a clear path to literature for them. So where was I going with this?
Just I don't know exactly where.
Yeah, like influences and quoting. Yeah, I mean, and that was one of the things that I sort of kept coming back to, how and because I mean, rap music is one of the strongest like the lyrics, the poetry of hip hop. For me, the strongest like descriptions or literary
like the kind of creation of a like imagery and
I mean, because it can have this very complex like artistic expression, and at the same time be very, from the streets and from very harsh environments, and not really, I mean, going, what do you say, like going all the way and on both ends, like being street and also being very pretentious, or trying to achieve something very literary, like someone, I don't know, like Kendrick Lamar, for instance, who's a brilliant and great artist, but also the things that he writes about, and the stories he tells that are from somewhere else.
And you feel like that isn't really happening very much in Sweden?
I mean, it is. It's not that it's not, but if you look at like certain areas or certain specific areas, then it doesn't exist at all. And the fact that it just feels. I mean, there's also this thing that like migration and the housing estates and crime with kids and all these things. There's such a the narrative in media is so strong that it's almost, and not only media, also like some parts of rap music. I mean, the entertainment part, and the way, there are all these simplifications that you have to sort of face, and I think that if you don't put it in a certain way or dress it up in a certain manner, then it's not really recognized and it's not really noticed, I think.
Yeah, well, so like people aren't interested in like stories from that area unless they, or like from that part of Swedish society, unless it's sort of dressed up in like a particular, unless it looks a certain way, or like
Yeah, I mean, it's like Hans Hansson says in the book, like you have to write, for, more. You have to write for the man on the street. It has to be simple. You have to be able to recognize. We have to understand you, but like that's not. It's not. If you simplify things, then you're not. The way I see it, you're not. I don't know. You're sort of making it the story weaker. You're sort of diluting it,
Yeah. I'm not quite sure how we're doing for time. I wonder, do we need to go to Q&A now? What's the... I think so. Okay, cool. We've got a question here in the Q&A. I wonder if I would love to talk a little bit more about different kinds of music, but we've got a question here. So I'm just going to have a look in the Q&A. So hi Ian. Ian Giles says, how is the question for you, Andrzej? How was it working with Nicky as a translator? You have to say nice things, obviously.
It was very interesting. It was like, I mean, maybe people don't know you have you wrote a what do you call it, PhD on like you could say, yeah. So I mean that the fact that you're like really familiar with a lot of the problems that sort of came up during the process, what was really like felt what do you say, what's the word, I mean I felt pretty like secure, and I trusted your the way you rewrote the book in some ways. And it was a lot of the questions that came up also made me, I mean, at some point I was working with the Czech translation of the same book, so it was very intense, like going through the book that you'd already written once, and sort of trying to, because when someone asks you to explain some things, some things I write, they're like intuitive and you're not really sure how it works, but for you as a translator, you have to sort of understand it on a different level. And that was really I mean, I think I learned a lot about the book and how some things that I had done that I wasn't really aware of, I think.
I was really interesting talking, because like you put me and the Czech translator in touch, didn't you? And we kind of exchanged a few emails about it, and I was really interested because she was saying that in Czech there isn't really, you can't really have a sort of informal register in literature. Like it just doesn't, like in this book I can write stuff in a very informal way. You know, I could just write slang and put it in the book, and it doesn't, I don't know, something to do with the conventions of English language writing, or the grammar of English maybe allowing
and I think also Swedish and English are closer in a way, so
yeah, I think that's pretty true. I wonder if there are like also maybe cultural similarities, and maybe also the like the use of, like, you know, the kind of really heavy use of English in Swedish that like facilitates some kind of, I mean, sorry, I've got a car alarm going off. This is one of the problems with Zoom. Yeah. Okay. Right. Sorry, I'm just going to try and concentrate. Yeah, just like trying to. I've completely lost my thread. Never mind. Whatever. I don't know what I was going to say. That. Whatever. What was I saying? Doesn't matter.
No, but I think. Do you feel like the work that you did, like with on, I don't know, the vernacular or writing about grime or rap music, did it somehow? I mean, did you use it in any way?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. So I wrote my PhD on like the use of slang, like contemporary slang in different kinds of literature. So I was writing about rap and writing about some Swedish writers who are using slang, and also some writers in the UK who are using slang. And like specifically that kind of multilingual slang that I was talking about before. And I think that, like, maybe partly because I just had to think about it so much. Like, I was kind of I spent 4 years like thinking about this concept and the fact that like languages are sort of porous, and they kind of absorb each other, you know, absorb like bits of each other. So it was great, actually. It was great to be able to like use the stuff, like all the theoretical stuff that I'd been kicking around, and actually I wish that for my PhD, instead of like writing a load of stuff, sorry, this is before I was going to swear, but I'm not going to swear, sorry. Basically using like being able to kind of have a practical application for all of that theoretical stuff was really, really cool. Like I really loved it, and it definitely was helpful. And also I think just because I listen to rap anyway, like I love, you know, it's like something, actually I don't so much at the moment just because I haven't been listening to very much music, but like I guess I had that awareness like long term that like the language of rap is like really useful. It's really great to listen to if you're a translator or if you're anybody who works with language, just because there's so much play in it, you know, there's so much sort of like dexterity. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about I don't know actually exactly when we're finishing. I guess we're finishing it. Okay, cool. Oh, we have a question here. Is this a question for Andrzej? From Anna Gilmore. Sorry, I'm just wondering. So there's a question from Anna Gilmore. How long did it take for you to Andrzej, right? How long did it take for you to write your first draft, and did you encounter any blockers, and how did you overcome them? How long did how many drafts did this book go through, Andrzej?
I'm trying to think. I'm not sure. I mean, the way I work is usually the first part, like the start takes really long time, and is really difficult, and then the more I get started and the more I'm into it and the more I have sort of a whole, the faster and easier it is. So in the beginning, like the first, the first drafts of the first part, I probably went through a whole lot. I don't know how many, but it's a lot of them. Like trying to find the rhythm and the style or whatever. And what was the second part? Blocks. Blockers.
Did you encounter any blockers?
Well, well, I think like in the beginning there are a lot of them. In this book, it was also a lot about like trying to figure out, what I want to write about and what I want to, don't want to write about and put in, and things that, because I mean, it's probably clear by now, I'm not really, I'm not interested in sort of, the autobiographical parts of, of the trade. And if I can't sort of mold it into some kind of, I don't know, art or something like that has a type, a certain structure or composition, then I'm really reluctant to use it. So before I had an idea of how this was going to sort of work, I guess that was maybe what a blocker, is this, because if it's just like stories of misery, then I'd rather not put them out there. There's enough of that.
Yeah.
So, and that, eventually I guess I overcame it by sort of finding a way to do something a little bit different. And yeah.
I hope that answers your question, Anna. There's one, I think we've got time for one last question, unless I can answer this super speedily. So this is a question from Denise Hansen. Hi, Denise. She says, she's wondering about the translation process and whether meeting Andrzej in person helped to inform my translation work in any specific ways, and were you in contact throughout the work? So yes, it was incredibly helpful to meet Andrzej, simply because at the point when I met him, it was quite early on in the process. I think maybe I'd sent you like a bit of a draft of like a first section.
Yeah.
I had like an idea that I would have kind of translated the whole thing and we could go through it, but it just clarified a lot of things. I was able to ask you a lot of questions about like what you'd set out to do, and like what the kind of how the book structure worked in a way that I hadn't figured out yet at that point. Not something that I commonly experience as a translator. Normally, like I read a book, I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, right, got it. And with this one, it was really like, okay, I've read this twice now. What's going on? Like, as I said at the beginning, I don't think that that's an impediment to like enjoying the book, but it is an impediment to translating it successfully. So that was really helpful, but also just generally, I think you were like super forthcoming and like helpful with a lot of questions that I had. Like I remember kind of going over things over and over again with you, and I think that I
Yeah.
feel really, really lucky for that you were so kind of patient with my questions. And also just like a lot of stuff that I couldn't know, because, you know, like a lot of, for instance, like slang or specific references where you know, they would be as opaque to a Swedish reader.
Yeah, some
Opaque's the
of
wrong
them
word, but like,
definitely, yeah.
So yeah, that's.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a balance that was hard to. I mean, I guess we were working with it. Like, I mean, slang has that sort of. It's one of the purposes to use it, sort of to shut some people out and to create. What do you call it? Yeah, communities. But I mean, like the academic lingo or whatever, it does the same things, but it's not really thought of that way. But if you and that's also in the book, like that there are references to, I don't know, to philosophy or political theory or what do you call it? Yeah, musical theory.
Yeah.
So but I think, again, going back to, like, that's one of the things that I like about hip hop is sometimes it doesn't really apologize for being like really, really what do you call it? Like you have to know certain things. It's just for the
like,
yeah, exactly. So, but at the same time, you want to keep the reader. You know, you don't want the reader to feel stupid or left out, unless it's absolutely necessary, I guess.
All right. So yeah, I think if we don't have any more questions, then I hope that all you readers out there will feel very included by this book and go out and buy a copy from Brookline Booksmith if you are local. Where do you ship?
We do. We ship in the U.S.
There we go. All of you US readers out there, get clicking on those links.
Thank you both so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When it's so late from where you guys both are, so I really appreciate that. Thank you all for listening and for your questions, and hope to see you the next event. Bye.
Bye-bye.